Hi everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about animal metabolism, hormones, and stress. So metabolic rate, it's the sum of energy used in a given time interval, and it's usually measured in kilocalories. Basal metabolic rate, BMR, is the metabolic rate of an endotherm at rest at a comfortable temperature range. Standard metabolic rate, SMR, is the metabolic rate of an ectotherm at rest at a specific temperature. And endotherms have a higher metabolic rate than ectotherms of comparable size. So, size and metabolic rate. Metabolic rates scales positively with body mass. And if you can see in this graph, metabolic rate increases by 0.75, so mass to the 0.75. So if you see the slope right here, 1, which is in dashed line, the actual line is a little bit lower than that, so that tells us that it's the mass to the 3/4. Across animals, metabolic rate increases by 0.6 to 0.8 per 1 gram of body mass, but we simply just say mass to the 0.75. And this means that large animals don't eat as much as we think if the metabolism and mass was a 1.1 ratio. On the right side, it's the same graph, except on the y-axis, it's now mass-specific metabolism. So this is per mass, which refers to mass-specific. And that's how much energy an animal needs per unit of their body mass. And as you can see, this is an inverse relationship between energy needed per kilogram of body mass and total body mass. What that means is that small animals don't need as much total energy as large animals, but a 450 kilogram, say, elephant doesn't need as much total energy input as a 45,000.01 kilogram of, like, say, a mouse animal, which would equal to 450 kilograms. So therefore, small animals need more energy input per kilogram of body weight than do large animals. Next, we're going to be talking about endocrine and nervous system. So endocrine system is hormones get released into bloodstream by endocrine cells. Target cells express specific hormone receptors, and signal transmission is slow relative to nervous system, but the effect lasts longer. In the nervous system, signals travel along dedicated routes, target specific cells in the brain or body, and signals are transmitted as electrical impulses along neurons. And the signal transmission is very fast. Now we're going to be talking about hormones versus neurohormones versus neurotransmitters. So in the endocrine signaling, endocrine cells release hormones into bloodstream where they travel to target cells that express receptors. In the neuroendocrine signaling, there's neurosecretory cells, which are specialized neurons that release neurohormones into the bloodstream where they travel to target cells that express receptors. And in the synaptic signaling, neurons release neurotransmitters into a synaptic cleft. So what synaptic cleft is, it's this space right here between one neuron and the next one. And the neurotransmitters, they bind to the receptors of the, or on the postsynaptic neurons, which is the neurons right here. We have 3 major classes of hormones. First, we have the peptic hormones, which are protein products of genes. They're water soluble, so they are readily diffuse through the blood, but they can't diffuse through the cell membrane. So we have a receptor protein that sits on the outside of the target cells. For steroid hormones, which are derived from cholesterol, they're lipid soluble, so they require a transporter protein to pass to the blood, and then they can readily pass through the cell membrane, and the receptors are usually in the cytoplasm. And the third major class is amine hormones, which are derived from single amino acids. So what do hormones do in a cellular level? We're going to be looking at a water-soluble hormone, and example is epinephrine. So water-soluble hormones induce cellular response via signal transduction, which is a process by which a signal is transmitted through a cell by a series of molecule events ending with cellular response. Hormone receptor binding on cell surface triggers a chain of events converting extracellular chemical signal to specific intracellular response. And second example, we're going to be looking at lipid-soluble hormones, and an example is estradiol. So lipid-soluble hormones pass readily through cell membrane, which we already covered that, and the receptors are usually in the cytoplasm. So the hormone receptor complex enters nucleus where it acts as a transcription factor. That should be in bold, transcription factor. It promotes or suppresses transcription of target genes. Next, we're going to be looking into stress. So hypothalamus-pituitary adrenal HPA axis. So if you see, hypothalamus is the command center for endocrine system, and it's a source of releasing or inhibiting factors that are released to the anterior pituitary. And in here, the hypothalamus releases inhibiting hormones called CRH that tells the anterior pituitary to release another hormone called ACTH. Next, in the adrenal glands, we have two parts. The adrenal medulla, which is in the middle, it releases epinephrine and norepinephrine. And the adrenal cortex, which is in the outer portion, release two steroid hormones, the glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. So what happens during a stress response? So first, we get stress and the hypothalamus responds. At that point, we get a direct nerve signal or nerve impulses that get sent through the adrenal medulla, which we know as the fight or flight response. After that, the epinephrine and norepinephrine, they get released into the circulation, and then we get a series of responses like increased blood pressure, metabolic rate, breathing rate, glycogen broken down to glucose. We get increased blood glucose. We get changes in blood flow resulting in increased alertness, decreased digestive, excretory, reproductive system activity. And as I said before, this is immediate, spontaneous, not spontaneous, but an immediate reaction. And if the stress persists, if it stays, then the hypothalamus kicks in. It releases the corticotropin, releasing hormone that gets sent to the anterior pituitary. Then we get the ACTH that gets released into circulation that targets the adrenal cortex. From there on, glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids get released into circulation, and then we get a different sets of responses. So protein fats break down, it gets converted into glucose, which increases blood glucose. We get increased blood volume and pressure. And the immune gets response. And as I said, this takes several minutes. So that's it for today's video, and just good luck on the study.